education, and real-world knowledge about the voiceover industry. It's the Voiceover Gurus Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Voiceover Gurus Podcast. I'm your hostess with the mostess, Linda Bruno. If this is your first time finding us, welcome. If you've been listening for a while, welcome back. We always appreciate our loyal listeners and any reviews. I've been seeing some reviews posting up, which has been great. We always appreciate that too, to get that feedback. So this is really cool today because I love when I find out about a different avenue of voiceover, something that's not the norm, that the majority of us are doing all the boring stuff, but the stuff that makes money. I'm not going to complain about that. And I was lucky enough to get in touch through Dave with a gentleman that is joining me today, Rob Reider. How are you?
I am just fine, Linda. It is good to be with you. And when I got to visit with Dave after we worked together in 2020, was the first time we worked together. We met in person really for the first time just a couple of weeks ago. I got to see his studio complex at Digital Waterworks, and we walk in and I see the Voiceover Gurus. Are you kidding me? And then I find out that he and you have worked together for many, many years. And so I'm thrilled to be able to be on your program. That's really cool.
Well, I appreciate that so much. So Dave every year works in conjunction with Bethpage because they have an Airshow that is produced. We have a beautiful Long Island is gorgeous. We have beaches, we have vineyards, we have shopping, and we have a place called Jones Beach that can house a lot of people. And every year, Memorial Day weekend, they host an Airshow. And you are the Airshow announcer. And it's so cool.
It is really fun. I have been involved with the show every year except the first year. And one of the performers after the first year said, you need to get a real announcer. And so I was recommended by Sean D. Tucker, and they came to me. And so I've been working with the Parks Department and Bethpage ever since on the show. This is my 18th of 19 years that they've had the show. And next year will be the 20th year, and I will be there again.
Wow. So now, for those of us that have no idea, what do you do as an Airshow announcer?
Well, I have the responsibility of telling the crowd what's happening next and what's happening now and holding the show together. That's when I grew up in a musical family. My grandmother was a musician, went to the Conservatory of Music in Cincinnati. My mother was a singer. She was in 1939 voted Society's #1 songstress in New York City.
Wow.
We have pictures of her on a date with Robert Stack. She dated John F. Kennedy. She dated several times Franklin Delano Roosevelt's son.
My goodness.
And so she was quite good. She got into television. And the musical thing for me continued. And I did high school. I did musicals, did My Fair Lady and Music Man, had leading roles. When I went to the University of Cincinnati, I did musical theater, although I was a broadcasting major.
Okay.
I played the part of Riff in their first production of West Side Story and understudied Tony and wound up on TV in Cincinnati.
Wow.
Actually on a 4-market talk variety show, Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, Indianapolis. And it was a noon to 1:30 live, no net, live commercial show.
Wow.
And I say all this because it builds a kind of foundation for what I ended up doing.
Right.
The show, I was a singer on the show. I sang everything from John Denver to show tunes to Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Fascinating.
8-piece band on the show. It was cool. Live studio audience. But my dad, after the war, went to get his pilot's license. He soloed but couldn't get it because he was colorblind. But there's the aviation thing that we built models and we went to the Air Force Museum when we moved to Ohio. And all
this has been a part of your life forever.
Oh, so aviation and music, and if you will, showbiz came together as I started volunteering at the Dayton Air Show back in the late 70s. It eventually grew enough that in 2006, I stepped away from another job, sold another business and a sound system business, and went to work full time at Airshows. So I leave on a Wednesday or Thursday, get to the show. There's a Friday rehearsal show, Saturday and Sunday full up productions. Then I go home on Monday, and I do that about half the year. And I've been making a full-time income doing that.
So how many shows do you do a year then?
I have averaged over the past 18 years about 22 shows a year. I'm cutting back. I'm cutting way back.
And so you travel to where? What are some of
I have traveled as far away as Japan, but New York is one of the biggest shows that I do at Jones Beach. That it is the premier air show in New York, as you know.
Yeah.
I think this past weekend before Memorial Day weekend this year, they had it was over 400,000 people for the 3 days. They count cars, so it's not a lie.
Yeah.
And then I do in San Diego, I do the biggest military show in the country, Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, and everything in between. So I'll travel. I go to a convention and I have a booth and I say, pick me.
So now at the show, technically, you're in a tower?
I'm up on a stage, an elevated stage, so I have a good view of the entire aerobatic box, that area in which the airplanes fly. And I stand next to the guy who's the air traffic controller, the air boss. And we're looking at the schedule that he writes up. And I look at him, I said, how much time we got for commercials? And so then he does that. And I do my commercials for WABC and Bethpage Federal Credit Union and Newsday. And, so I do the whole gamut of commercials. So I'm a live read guy. And I get to share my love of aviation with thousands and thousands, millions of people a year.
Yeah. So now you're up in this tower and you're saying you're doing this all live, which is a pressure-filled situation to begin with. Okay.
Yeah.
That's old school stuff that we've experienced, but a lot of people don't anymore. And so you're going out over like a massive PA system?
Yes.
Okay.
So they can hear me up and down the beach about a half mile either way.
Okay. And I assume
it's on WHLI radio up there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So live broadcast from there.
Yep.
From your place into WHLI. Okay. So wow. Now, obviously now you've talked about the fact that you have a background in aviation with your family, your father, and what you're announcing exactly what?
I'm announcing, say, some airplanes from the American Air Power Museum, which is at Farmingdale Airport. If they're flying over, those are World War II airplanes. And as they fly over, I'm talking about the planes.
Really?
Yeah. And
so you're going to have all that knowledge.
Yeah, but I'll go back to my time, the 13 years I did live TV, Linda, that what I learned there in terms of keeping a show going was as important as the knowledge that I learned later on and began to learn over the years about aviation. That stuff you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of keeping the flow going is something totally different. And I think that's what has helped make me a career, helped me to make a career out of air show announcing. It's been good. And I do other e-learning stuff too. I was doing e-learning for a company called Sporty's Pilot Shops before they even called it e-learning.
Really?
I've helped teach thousands of people to learn to fly.
Wow.
It's most widely used pilot training video series on the planet. So I've been doing that too. So it's just
So now you mentioned before we even connected and went live here that live, it's a podcast. No, live. I know it's hilarious because my brain goes to, we're live. We're on the air. We're not on the air.
We are live. You and I are live.
That's about at the end of it. But I don't do any post-production editing on these. So I like all the mistakes to stay contained. You started in voiceover, but you said you were doing voiceovers in the 70s.
Yeah. And those were from the company that I worked for was producing a series of young people's specials. And I was asked to write some music for those and narrate them. And even back then, and I didn't get it at the time, I was coached to lay back and not announce and just converse.
Wow.
That's how forward thinking Tom Robertson, the producer, was. He said, no, don't announce it. Just tell me the story.
Yeah, great.
So learning to unannounce for me as I decided, as I've been transitioning now from air shows to do more voice work, to learn the biggest challenge for me has been to learn not to announce.
That's usually the one that, tricks a lot of people, especially folks that were in broadcasting for a long time.
Yeah.
You get in that mode. But back then you were even being directed to stay conversational and have that one-on-one connection.
Yes.
So that hasn't, changed. So would you say you're basically announcing the air shows? Do you feel that you're in announcer mode?
Pretty much, but there are stories that I get to tell. And when I start to tell the stories, it's not, now, ladies and gentlemen, look at the C-47 as it comes by. And I don't put on that voice, but I say the C-47 was the military version of the Douglas DC-3, the airplane that changed the way America traveled. And so it's more, and then I get to tell the stories.
And you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
So that comes through naturally in the read as well. Or in your how much is scripted?
Very little.
Really?
Very little. I've had some of this stuff I've been doing so long, repetition is the mother of skill.
Yeah.
There are things that as a plane goes by, certain things you'll see on it at a moment that you'll be able to talk about. And that's, it has worked out really well for me that I had that television experience, which was not scripted. It was a live show. And I mean, Bob Hope was a friend of the show. Dick Clark was a friend of the show. Leo Ball was on the show. We had lots of major guests on the show because it had such a big regional reach. Those 4 markets that we were on made it the 3rd biggest market in the country for some years. So anyway, but it's just been a joy to be able to do that. But as I have gotten older and looked for where I wanted to go in the future, I thought, I've got this studio that I've been using with Sporty's Pilot Shops for years. I've done other stuff in there. I've helped musical groups, worked with the Kingston Trio, helped them get a Lifetime Achievement Grammy, produced a project for them. And but I said, I want to make that studio pay for itself. And so I started looking for voiceover. And long story short, the market decided that my niche was either e-learning to some degree, and I have a couple of e-learning clients. Sporty's continues to this day, and audiobooks. And I telling the stories.
Right. Yeah, I can hear that in your vocal delivery.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you said that you're sitting in your you said you're sitting in your control room and that your studio is on the other side.
Yes.
So those of you that get to go onto the YouTube channel, you get to see what he has behind him. So give me the difference of control room and I see you have planes. You have some
a lot of aircraft stuff there that I have gotten over the years over here. And well.
Yeah. Yes. You're pointing at it.
That was an award that I was given by the International Council of Airshows, the International Council of Airshows Sword of Excellence. And that's the highest award an airshow professional can receive. And I received that in 2007. But it's my place where the control room is where the computer is, the interface is. I have a U-87 in the other room that I use. And this is where I edit. I like to get out of the chair to edit.
So is the other side just a recording booth?
It's a 13 by 17 foot room, and it's baffled up. I enlisted the help of Jim Edgar and Dan Leonard and George Whittam.
Oh, good.
All of whom I should say, lent their ears to this. And I now have a setup that I have not changed in over 2 years.
Fantastic.
Even the baffling stays. If I have to move it out for a podcast episode, if I'm doing a twofer, I everything goes back within inches of where it was.
Yeah.
So it's like you're sitting there, you got your 416. It's always in the same position, right?
Yep, it is. I stand. I have a movable desk, so I sit on the podcast, but I stand for all of the announcing. Here's a question for you. So are there other people that do what you do? I mean, how many air shows are happening in the country?
There are several hundred air shows. There are some other guys who do it. There are about only 4 or 5 of us who really make a living at it.
Gosh.
The others do other things. in addition to announce air shows, but this has been my primary source of income since '06.
So is it a specific type of air show that you...
No, not really, but I tend to get some of the bigger ones, and so those bigger shows include either the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels.
Okay.
For the jet teams. And so I've gotten to be friends with those, and the Blues made me an honorary back in 2010. So I have lived a charmed life.
So I'm going to be rude and ask you your age.
74. I'll be 75 in a week and a half.
See, and so I have students that come to me, older students, and they say, I'm too old to do voiceover. And I say, there is no age limit on voiceover. Yeah.
You're so right. Well, think of this, that ageism. Now, if I would never be able to do a millennial, I'm not even going to try to make my voice. But I can get late 30s up. Mm-hmm. If I want to sound old, I can. But
yeah, you do not sound 74, 75.
Good. but ageism and sexism and racism don't have to exist in this business. That's one of the joys of this thing.
It's a beautiful thing.
Nobody's looking at you or listening to say, what about where? Yeah, it would be like regionalizing somebody. Oh, he's from the South. He's no good.
Mm-hmm.
Not so.
If you're looking for a Southern accent, there you go. You know, there's a purpose for that. I had a student come in yesterday and she was downplaying her Jamaican accent. And I said, please do not downplay it. If you can remove it at times, great. But if not, that's what makes you you and unique.
Absolutely. You don't want to mess with that. The people at VO Atlanta. Oh, I'm blanking on Matt's last name. He's a British guy, but he makes 75% of his business here in the United States with a British accent.
Really? Yeah. I guess it's what you do with it.
Sure.
You know?
So it's an exciting opportunity to be an announcer on one world, but also do voice work on another and tell stories in a different manner, be it fiction or nonfiction. I've learned so much.
But that's great because a lot of voice talent, I have a friend who's a stadium announcer for he was for the Mets, for the Jets, sports.
Wow.
But he cannot do straight up conversational commercial. Can't do it. I tried to coach him into it. And for him, he is so stuck in that mode. No, now betting, and that whole thing. Yeah. And it's, and it's a talent, and I have gone to hockey games with him where he will literally do the play-by-play for me sitting next to me. And that is a gift, people that can do that. It's a whole other realm of voiceover, which I find fascinating, but it's great that you are malleable and versatile and have been able to transition so that way you can do all different types of genres.
I'm glad that I'm not pigeonholed. I'm glad that I've had good coaching from folks. My audiobook coach is Hillary Huber, who's LA, but in the summertime, she's on Long Island.
Is she?
Yes, she works in a booth on Long Island. She brings her mic and computer out, so she works every day.
Do you know where she's on Long Island?
I can't.
So I can stalk her?
It's she's farther east. She's farther up east, and I can't remember exactly where. I've seen, actually, she talked me through a Googler. There's the house there.
Oh, really? Maybe she's out in the Hamptons or something. Out. Who knows?
But she's been very successful and very direct with me in terms of. You tend to, as a newbie, if there's a fast action scene, you want to read it faster. And she says, please do Steve Austin's $6 Million Man. Slow it down. Let it reach the ears, and at an air show, my dynamic range is pretty significant. Well, you can't do that with an audiobook. You can't be shouting at people.
Right.
Somebody said to me, pretend you're sitting on somebody's shoulder and talking into their ear when you're doing a book.
That's pretty intimate.
Yeah.
That's
nonfiction, maybe not so much, but whatever.
Do you do mostly fiction?
I'm such a newbie. I've only got 13 titles to my name at this point.
That's a lot of books.
I'm making good money at it.
Hey.
But I I think, well, Hillary says nonfiction and mystery thrillers are my
your thing.
genres. Yeah.
Now, are you finding the work yourself, or do you have an agent that handles that for you?
Finding the work myself.
Good for you.
I've had, there's one, I put a thing up on LinkedIn when I finished a novel for a high school buddy of mine, and an Air Force lieutenant colonel, retired lieutenant colonel, reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, I have written 6 books. Somebody narrated the first one and I don't like it. Would you be willing to audition?
Uh-huh.
And so now I'm waiting on the 3rd book from him for approval.
Fantastic.
And last of the pickups. And I got a good rate.
Yeah.
I think it's a numbers game. I think you know that. I've heard you talk about it, how it's a numbers game.
Yep, it is.
Agents, that model has shifted a lot, hasn't it?
It really has. It really has.
The agent is not the gatekeeper quite so much anymore, right?
No, I mean, the only thing that they're savvy at would be negotiating something for you. Or they do bring in the bigger ended jobs, financial. So, it is a goal to get an agent for a lot of new folks, which I tell them, don't pressure yourself on it too much, because right now in this non-union majority world, there's so many opportunities to audition for things that you don't go through an agent. And then you have to, though, become a very good business person, because you have to be able to handle all of the rate negotiation. How long is it going to run for? Am I going to get paid again? Am I going to get paid at all?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it. So I know people are like, I need an agent. Well, an agent isn't going to listen to you either, unless you have something to offer them. And also if you've proven that you can book jobs, and you've proven that you can, because what do they want? They want to make a commission off you. They want to make money. So, agreed. It's like finding it yourself and hustling. That's really how it is with voiceover now.
It really is. As much as we want to stroke our egos, there are a couple things working against us. This whole business is anonymous, right?
Yeah, right.
I've had one project where I got a credit.
Really?
And it was for the tourism board of Zagreb, Croatia.
Oh my goodness!
It happened in 2020, and they put my name at the end of it. I thought,
oh wow!
And it won some tourism film awards. But it's anonymous, so our egos don't get stroked. Number 2, we have to sell ourselves, which means we're testing our fragile egos.
Mm-hmm.
Because you call it selling, call it marketing. You got to just, I've put out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, like close to 1,000 emails and cold calls to production companies. I got 2 clients.
Yeah, I know. It's so discouraging.
But if you go in understanding that,
right, My general rule of thumb is I just try to get as many people as possible's ears on my voice. So I will just, like a machine, send it out, and then lo and behold, it may take a year, it may take 2 years. Someone will contact me and say, oh, I got your newsletter. And I see it that they reply to the newsletter from 2 years ago. And say, hey, I might have a project for you. But let me tell you, getting responses and getting someone to actively say, I listened to your demo, we might have something for you. That's like a 1% thing for me.
Yeah. I'm one of those clients that I got. It took a year to germinate, and he's in Dayton, Ohio, an hour from where I live.
Wow. Yeah.
So it is, and learning that it's a numbers game. And I think maybe from Bill DeWeese is a friend of mine.
Okay.
Has become a very good friend. And one of the things that he talked about was that the market, they said, try everything and let the market decide what your niche is going to be. And that's what happened with me.
Yeah. Agreed.
Audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, that's the other thing. Some people come in and say, what am I going to be good at? And I go, whatever you get paid for. That's what you're good at.
Yeah. What? And Dan Leonard once said about all the awards, what's the best award in the business? He said, getting paid from the same client a second time.
It's true. Yeah, repeat clients are the goal, the gift, when you can keep them as long as, you can, because that's what builds your career. That's what makes I have another student asked me the other day, am I ready to jump off and quit my job? And I was like, how many recurring clients do you have? Do you have 6 months worth of savings? Do you have enough to carry you for the dead months? Because it's inevitable. It happens.
Yeah. It sure does.
But I guess you have consistency with these shows, which is great.
Yeah.
Because it's like, so you're only traveling half the year, which is great because you can still work on other things like your books and the e-learning projects.
Mm-hmm.
But that's fantastic because you're still doing something voiceover related and you're in, baby. You got you're in.
It has. Yeah, it's been good because I've been able to go into the voiceover business, the classic voiceover business, commercials, e-learning, corporate, whatever, with dealing from a position of strength, and that I already have a voice business going. So some people say I'm a voice talent. I almost like to call myself a voice guy, just a voice guy, because I do different kinds of voice stuff.
But you're a talent.
Well, thank you. So are you.
I try.
I've seen your client list.
I've been very fortunate. Not without a lot of hard work and, because I came to New York in 97. So I've been here a long time. But, my opportunities came usually through agents. The bigger ones did. But then the rest was all hustling. It was hustling, finding clients. And then keeping them happy. I worked for a client on Friday that I have had since 1997.
Wow.
Yeah. So
and I'm assuming, would I be correct in assuming, Linda, that when that happens and they call you, you will lay other things aside to handle that client as expeditiously as possible, right?
This client happens to be one of my most favorite clients as well, because they are respectful. They are generous. They understand that I'm running a business, they're running a business. And they called, and I was in the middle of a lesson with a student. And I said, I'm sorry, I have to take this. And I never interrupt my lessons. And he's like, yeah, no problem, because he was going to read copies. So I picked up and talked to the gentleman. And I said, I'm sorry, this is one of my longest running clients. If he's calling and it's a Friday afternoon, he needs something ASAP.
Before the end of business day.
Right. So I'm like, I have to do this and I will be right back with you, which, only took 5 minutes. But yeah, it's customer service and just keeping those relationships open. And just first, you obviously have to be good at what you do. But secondly, you just have to keep it going. Just deliver.
But have I not heard you say, Linda, it's not necessarily the most talented person who gets the work. It's the person who is prompt, responsive, responsible, and dependable.
Yep.
There are probably more adjectives, but I've heard you say that.
Yeah, no, it's so true. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have the business acumen, it doesn't matter.
Or if you're a pain in the butt.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You'll work your way out of jobs with that. Some people get a little bit of an ego. And that never goes very far.
I'm aware of a former Airshow announcer who did that. Who
really?
was a major market radio guy and had the best chops in the world, but he talked his way out of some air shows because he just ran at the mouth and was not responsive to the sponsors of the show.
Oh, geez. Well, there's your your issue. You got to remember the sponsors. You got to who's paying the bills, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So now you mentioned that you mentioned something about Emmys before we connected. How many Emmys do you have?
I've got 5. 4 for music that I wrote and performed for these young people specials, which also won Peabody Awards, and 1 for my on-air performance when I was doing TV. There's still stuff on YouTube from when I was a much younger guy with much longer hair and much darker hair.
So
I'm about 15 pounds lighter.
All these years being in the business, what are some takeaways for you to give to people that are just starting out?
Be thankful you got a job. Number 2, set your ego aside, because if your ego gets in the way, then you're the people who hire you are not going to hire you. Stay hydrated.
Yes, as I'm drinking water.
You're right here. Yes, indeed.
I always say about the ego, I really don't think that this business, you can afford to have an ego because it's humbling constantly. You know?
My gosh. And it got more so in 2020.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I joined up with voices.com in 2018 or early 2019. And Voice 123 and a couple other places. And I have since stopped all of those things. I my paid subscription to VDC and V123. I stopped those. I even fooled around with Fiverr for a while and set that aside because I just was not ready. Because I was busy making real money, I was not ready to deal with the clients who wanted the moon and didn't want to pay you worth of crap.
Oh yeah, and you're worth more than that.
Yeah. So now, not to say I know people who are doing exceptionally well on Fiverr, and more power to them. They figured out the algorithm, but I think even those people still deal with the bottom feeders who are pains in the butt.
They always seem to be. Yeah, the ones that don't pay very much are always the biggest pains.
That is really true.
And I used to work for Walmart years ago, and our sessions would last 15 minutes because they would be like, love it. Great. Just give me 2 more reads. And I would finish the session and be like, I love these people. It's so easy to work with. And it was union money. I mean, it was going through the agent, the whole thing. But I've always found, I worked for Disney for 14 years. Wonderful people. They were not pains about stuff. They were professional. And, it's just.
I've worked remote sessions with a particular client for a major U.S. airline for training stuff. And the last big one I had for them, we allotted 2 hours for the session. We were done in 40 minutes.
That's because you're good.
Well, that's because, but they knew what they wanted. And so I gave them a test read. I said, is that friendly enough or is it authoritative enough? And they said, yes, no, whatever. And I delivered and they were done. And they paid and it's good. And they keep coming. And I just did one for them on Monday. And it was a very short one for a different company, but they said, just do it solo. What kind of, that does my heart good.
Yes, seriously. They trust you.
Yeah.
Well, it took, because I worked for Disney in Asia, in Southeast Asia.
Wow.
That's where so we used to connect via ISDN live. And with the 12-hour time change, I would be at the studio at 9:00 at night for their 9 a.m. session.
Please don't tell me after you worked all day.
Yes. So that period, and I didn't care. I'm like, my dream was always to be a voice for Disney. I didn't care. I would do whatever it took. But it took them 7 years to trust me to the point where they started to let me do the sessions on my own.
7 years?
Yeah. Also, they didn't want us to keep paying for ISDN. It was at that point when ISDN was starting to die out. So I was like, oh my gosh, 7 years. They're like, you can finally do the projects by yourself. But,
with Sporty's Pilot Shops, I did it for a number of years where the producer would come over and sit with me. We were slicing tape back then.
I remember those days.
Yeah. Over my shoulder, right there. One of my 2 leftover reel-to-reel machines, neither of which works properly. So
a Tascam?
Yes, it is.
It is a Tascam. Yeah. We have a few here gathering dust because Dave never gets rid of old equipment. But I remember them from the radio station.
He does have a museum there, doesn't he?
Oh, God, I know. And it makes us crazy because you see how nice this place is. And then there's, why are you keeping this DAT machine from, God knows when? And you never know when you might need it. I'm like, I don't know. That's Dave for you, though.
Yeah, well, but Dave knows what he's doing, too.
I guess he does.
Yeah, you think?
I've only been working with him for 20 plus years, but here's a question for you. And I'll go ahead.
I think he referred to you as his work wife.
Yes, because I probably see him more than he sees his actual wife, Vanessa.
Oh, that's too funny.
So do you have an Airshow demo? Is that even something needed? It's probably not because of your relationships.
The answer, the latter is correct. I do not have an Airshow demo.
Right.
I actually have a scripted open that I do that's all timed out. But I do it live every time.
Uh-huh.
And I have that all timed to music. I mean, right to the bar, to the beat, but I do it live and I've got it memorized. And then I have, as the plane comes over with the jumpers who are going to bring in the American flag, I go to another cut where I have a piece about the history of the flag. If I were to do a narration demo, that would a new narration demo. This thing about the history of the flag and the national anthem would go on it because it's 1:23, and I could cut it down to make it usable. But it's the relationships. I have been fortunate enough to build up a very positive relationship and reputation in the air show business that it's put me pretty much at the top of the heap.
So I know that you were involved, because you have your knowledge with aviation, but when was your first show?
It was actually in 1978 when I was working with ham radio operators at an air show in Cincinnati. And the guy who announced on Saturday I was on TV at the time, so I was a known entity in Cincinnati. For 8 years. And the guy who was there on Saturday, a weatherman from another station, didn't show up on Sunday. And I was working as a communicator, and they said, Rob, we need you to announce. I said, I don't want to announce. And so I announced that. And then I started volunteering at the Dayton Air Show starting in 79. And then, long story short, got mic time, got encouraged. I joined the International Council of Air Shows in 1995. And it took another 11 years to build up enough of a reputation where I felt like I could walk away from my other job.
Wow. The International Council of Air Shows?
Yeah, ICAS. Yeah. It's a trade organization, and we have a convention every year. And that's where I have my booth where I exhibit and do
So if somebody says, say something for me, what do you say? Because that always happens for voice talent.
Oh, gosh. I don't think, I don't know when that's happened. That doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, I get that. They're like, oh, you did this? Say something.
Yeah.
I go, give me $5 and I'll say something. Pay me.
If I were to do it, I would say, ever since men and women have walked on the earth, they've dreamed of flying. They wondered what the birds could see that they could not. Even 500 years ago, artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci dreamed of flight and made drawings of a flying machine. But it wasn't until 1903 that two brothers from Dayton, Ohio, Wilbur and Orville Wright, built a powered airplane and overcame gravity and taught the world to fly. Da-dum-bum-ba-bum-bum. And that's what we're going to do today, New York. We are going to fly. And it goes from that to that.
And people go crazy. Can you hear
so
them?
Cool at a military base, especially if the commanding officer and his executive or her executive officer are there and other people for there, and they've not heard that. They stand there and they go, oh yeah. And that's an invitation back if it's a new show.
Seriously. Wow.
But that's the opening. I write some of this stuff so it can be.
Have you not done documentaries?
I've done a few.
You have? Okay, because I was going to say it's completely perfect for documentary.
Yeah, the biggest documentary I did was actually for the governor of Illinois and the Department of Developmental Disabilities, and it was about the Hadamar Clinic that Hitler set up in Germany to begin exterminating those who were not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
but do you pitch yourself as a documentary announcer, or is that not on your radar?
It's on my radar if I can get it, but I haven't pitched because at this point, I've got to time things. I'm going to retire from air show announcing after the 2024 season.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm in this sort of thing where the audiobooks are coming up, and now it's like, how can I get them all done at the same time?
Gotcha.
I'm coming up on a 4 straight week run coming up.
Oh, wow.
And I've got to be very careful of my voice during that time. And I've got 50, after we finish, I've got to do the last 50 pages of a book today for a publisher, and it's a union job, and
right.
I got to get it done.
Mm-hmm. So are you you've done your time with air shows?
Yeah, I've at my age, my wife, I'm still real healthy, and my wife wants to travel more.
Gotcha.
And
just take her to
I
the
don't
air
heard
shows.
that.
I guess that's not gonna fly.
No,
Get it? Fly?
No, she's yeah, right. Well, I've got a pilot's license. The two of us own an airplane, a small
Oh, so
airplane.
you can, yeah.
So I flew up to New York.
Oh, that's nice.
So I fly for business. My wife got a private pilot's license,
Ooh.
but she enjoyed. There's a show I have coming up in Duluth, Minnesota, sponsored by Cirrus Aircraft, and that's the airplane with a parachute.
Oh, okay.
And and they put me in the left seat of the jet.
Ooh.
So I'm flying it. I know how to fly the jet.
Wow.
Now I'm not cleared to solo in it, but the equipment in it is similar enough to the equipment that's in Jill's in my airplane that it's really pretty easy to fly and handle. So she'll be on that trip flying the jet. La-di-da. Better than first class,
fancy, honey. Fancy. So you're in Ohio now?
Yeah, Cincinnati, just outside of Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. Okay. Gotcha. And so obviously you house your plane in some facility.
Yep, 30 minutes from here.
That's great.
Airport. Yeah, Claremont County Airport.
One of my good friends, you probably heard him on the podcast, Brian Lee. He's a pilot. Mm-hmm. And he has a plane, and he uses it to basically go from Fort Myers up to his parents in Ocala. He goes up to his house in South Carolina, it's very convenient. He's taken me out in it a few times, and it's scary as all get out as far as I'm concerned, but you guys, and I'm glad you guys do it because it's something that would definitely not be comfortable for me.
Well, I think you probably would develop an understanding of it and an appreciation for it the more you were to do it. In getting there, when I think of what it was to drive from our home through New York, do the Cross Bronx, all the way out to Long Island.
I know.
Get stuck in Manhattan, going through all the never-ending construction that's in there when you get to the east side.
It's awful.
Or get stuck on the Cross Bronx for 45 minutes, to be able to be in an airplane and fly over it and say,
yeah.
See ya.
See ya. Yeah. So you fly into Republic?
Yep, I do.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And we stay right there near the airport, and and the New York show, as long as I've done it, has become such a neat thing. The family at the Jones Beach, at the state parks, and Bethpage Federal Credit Union are just such good folks. We just we handshake on contracts that they say, hey, listen, it's 60 days out. Would you please send us a contract? I said, okay.
Well, it's that kind of relationship that you've built. Do you think you're going to miss it?
The answer is yes and no. I mean, I've gotten to do some really cool things. In the pandemic, was I listening to you talking about being nervous? Being nervous on some sort of a live announce job or whatever.
Yes, live announce would always make me nervous.
Yeah. I think that was one of your recent episodes, but I got to do the Salute to America flyover at the White House on July 4th, 2020.
Oh my goodness.
Now I got hired for this, and they gave me a script, and I looked at it and said, okay, number one, I got to rewrite a lot of this because some of it was just Air Force fact sheets and Navy fact sheets, which were really dry. Number two, I said, and the people from the White House office or the military office, they understood that when you do a flyover of 50 airplanes or something like that, timing will change a little bit. So I said, you got to understand that I got to ad lib. I will probably have to ad lib.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, we trust you. And then at the rehearsal, the night before, they didn't do an actual flyover. They just did a cue to cue with this producer, a lady producer sitting next to me. And when I started the thing, I clicked on it. I was given 34 minutes. I was done in 29 minutes and 59 secones. Oh. And the producer got PO'd at me because I didn't do the right time. I said, ma'am, I can't There's no airplanes here. I don't know what's happening.
Right.
Well, it got even worse the night of the show on the 4th because the TV people didn't know a fighter from a bomber, and they were putting the wrong thing on the big screens and over the World Wide Web. And so I had to change, and I had to flip around and ad lib even more.
Oh, my goodness.
And it ended up being pretty darn good. I did at one point, I listened to the playback, and when I talked about the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima on August 6th, 1945, I said a B-29 bomber on August 6th, 1929 instead of 45. But I was.
And were you nervous? Were you nervous? I guess because all of your years of doing live anyway, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the president is there, the first lady is there, all sorts of dignitaries are there, and it was
freaking out.
It didn't have time.
I mean, I know when I go into live and when being in radio, it's almost like you turn on a mode and then the world shuts out and you go into this focus mode. And it's almost like all those the muscle memory comes back. Your brain goes to places that it needs to go, especially when you have to do like mode bend.
Oh boy, does it. Yes. I find myself every once in a while, I'll say something at a show, and I'm thinking, where did that come from? It's something I worded differently than I've ever worded it before. And it just happens. So yeah, you're in the zone, right, Linda?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's just your years of experience. I mean, it doesn't stop me from being nervous initially, but then once I'm on, it's like,
yeah.
And you can't make mistakes. You can't, so the pressure is definitely on, but it makes you, I personally, I kind of wish that more folks had to experience that. Because I think it's great for sessions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Because if you can control the energy and not let it throw your voice up,
right? Because if you're upset about something, or if somebody just made you angry, or I don't know, you're not feeling well. I've done shows where I've been sick, and you just, that mic turns on, you act like everything's great.
Hey.
And then turn off the mic and throw up in the trash can. But nobody knows that. They know it now, but yeah, it's that
oh my,
that mode. So that's probably where but my God, if somebody presented that to me, I'd be like, yeah, I can't do this.
But the things that you can do, nobody can take away from you. And so I think that's why the people at the White House approached me, because they knew of my reputation. They knew I could talk about things that had to be talked about. And those who were controlling it understood that I would be able to cover in case something didn't happen as planned. I've done the 2 Arsenal of Democracy flyovers over the Capitol too. And on the first one, the president of the International Council of Airshows, John Cudahy, who had written the script, he's listening. There's a guy here on talking to air traffic control over here, talking to the folks on air traffic control. He's telling John what's coming up. John is literally taking a Sharpie and going like this, flipping a page and pointing that and saying, now.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but
you're used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, and I almost hesitate to bring this up, but I think that there are some voice actors who get a very, very overinflated self-image.
Yes.
And you remember Cliff Robertson, the actor?
Yes.
Played Charlie in Letters for Flowers for Algernon, in the movie Charlie won an Academy Award back years ago. He was in Spider-Man as Spider-Man's uncle, and he was a pilot. He came to the first International Council of Airshows convention I ever attended, and he stood up in front of everybody, said, "You guys are the genuine article." He said, "Actors are people who make their livings reading other people's words, pretending to be somebody they're not, pretending to do on screen they could never do in real life. You guys are the genuine article."
Oh, wow.
Wow. And the other thing is, the business that I come from, if somebody screws up, they die. In voice business, punch and roll.
Yep.
Or click.
Yep.
And that, I just wish that those who get this self-image of how important narrators and voice artists are and actors are would remember that sometimes they're no more important than a plumber. A plumber I had a musicology prof say it, a plumber and a musician. Both are important. Neither is more important than the other.
It's true.
So
I think that's just what happens. Somebody goes on a lucky run sometimes, and they decide then that they're going to think that it's going to last forever. And that's just how it is. That, I always say my first, and I've said this many times on the podcast, my first voiceover coach, Connie Zimmett, maybe she rest in peace. She would always say there are 4 stages to an actor's life and a voice actor's life. And it would be, who is Linda Bruno? Get me Linda Bruno. Get me someone that sounds like Linda Bruno. Who is Linda Bruno?
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so we all
that's scary.
I know, but it's just true. And even agents have said to me, because there was at one point in time when I was booking everything. I was booking promos, I was booking documentaries, I was all over the place. And my agents would say, yeah, there's just times when we have talent and they will go through a hot streak. And it'll last, whatever, a year, 6 months, 9 months, and then it moves on. So people that go through this hot streak sometimes think, this is it. I'm just going to buy a house and I'm going to, spend all this money. And
it's gone, right? Oh my gosh.
Because nothing lasts forever. It just doesn't.
Say that again. Who is
Rob Reider? Yeah. Get me Rob Reider.
Get me somebody
sounds like Rob Reider, and then who is Rob Reider?
Yeah, part of the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing in terms of cutting back on the shows. I'm only doing 14 this year, 12 next year, and that's it. But Johnny Carson did it right, and there was a guy in Cincinnati who was a beloved newsman, who after he retired never showed up on the air again, and he was inducted into a short-lived Cincinnati Broadcasting Hall of Fame thing. And somebody asked him in a smaller gathering, not on stage, Peter, why didn't you come back? He said, because I wanted him to say, why didn't Peter Grant come back instead of why did he?
Oh, yeah.
And if I get out on top, I'll be forgotten pretty quickly. We all are, right?
Right.
Once we walk away, we're forgotten. But at least nobody's going to say, oh, Ryder stayed around too long.
Right. I know. Oh, that's the worst. That's the worst.
Yeah, it is the worst. Oh, gosh, Linda. I'm getting coached here. This is good.
I think about that with bands. I'm like, okay, Aerosmith, can we just wrap it up? I mean, let's just, or the Rolling Stones. You've had so much success for all these decades. Maybe it's time to just gracefully leave? I don't know.
I tell you what, I just closed a book deal with an author who wrote a book about a folk music group called the Chad Mitchell Trio from the 60s. And Chad Mitchell was the leader of the group. When he left the group, he was replaced by a young man named Henry John Duchendorf, John Denver.
Oh, wow.
And that was his start. And part of this book talked about how tragic John Denver's career was, that he worked so hard. He was the most famous entertainer on the planet for several years. Yep. And then when it was over, he couldn't scare up a hit, and it affected him. And he became really kind of a tragic guy.
Yeah.
And when I read the book, I thought, oh man, I was his intermission act once. I knew him, but not really well. But before he was a star, he let me sing one of his trademark songs. But that was on his way up, and he was amazing. But then when it was over, it was not the same guy.
That's the thing, to be able to handle it when you're not on top of the world.
Yeah.
And it's in any business, but especially mental health wise for voice actors. If you can look at it as a long game and just say, okay, I'm going to just keep trudging on my journey. If I have a few good years, fantastic. I'm going to do what I can. help other people, buy a house, whatever I'm going to do. But otherwise, you have to appreciate all of it. And you just have to think it's okay if I'm not working as much as I was. And that's a tough thing to wrap your head around. Some of us,
I think that's for everybody. I mean, when I was still chasing the airshow business before I went full time at it, I thought I was standing in the booth at the convention and people walking right by me. And I said, is this ever really going to happen for me?
Mm.
It took me 11 years after I joined the association and started as an exhibitor before I had enough going that I could jump off and go full time.
Wow.
And I've made it last for 17, 18 years. And it's been great, but I need to understand that backing down is going to be what's going to be happening to me. And I may end up just doing the sporties thing and the podcast that I do, and who knows, but
yeah. So what's your podcast?
My podcast is called I Learned About Flying from That.
Oh, great.
It's stories, and it's Flying Magazine. They've been around for 97 years. 3 years ago, last month, came to me and said, would you be interested in doing a podcast based on our most widely read column? I said, yeah, I read it all the time. So we put it together. I came up with a format. I even paid a guy to write music for me.
Nice.
So, and it's about pilots who have gotten into dicey situations and live to tell about it. And the lessons they've learned, they share. And over the course of the years that this has been in Flying Magazine as a printed column, they would get notes from pilots who had read the columns, learned the lessons, got into similar situations, and it saved their lives.
Wow. How powerful.
Yeah. So I've got the podcast is sponsored via Vemco Aviation Insurance. So there's money behind it.
Nice.
So I get paid. And yet it's missional because I can help people out by letting people share their stories. And rather than just 800 words, we take a half an hour.
Wow. That's great.
So we got 405,000 downloads since middle of December of 2020.
That's fantastic.
I'm very pleased.
You have such an audience. So, okay. So the podcast will continue. You'll continue audiobooks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you're going to continue e-learning and
whatever else I can scare up. I'm not going to let it. I've also heard you talk about work-life balance. Have I not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have to. I mean, for me, I know when I started out, I would be working these crazy hours, 7 days a week. Excuse me. But then you get to a point where you're like, I need to have a life too. And you need to close the door of the studio and leave and go be with family, go outside, take a walk, do something that has nothing to do with the business, right?
Jill and I ended up being down here till 7:00 last night. We came up, we had dinner outside. We had Campari tomatoes, fresh mozzarella, fresh basil.
Oh, delicious.
With a garlic vinaigrette dressing. And that was our dinner. And then we ended up watching an episode of NCIS, and then we went out for a walk.
Very nice. That's good family time right there. That's quality time. Okay, so you're really just going to retire from the airshow stuff.
Yeah, and that will take some of the pressure off. And we've been careful with our money, so we're not going to hurt.
Good.
I'll be able to take day trips in the airplane up to Chicago and visit daughter, and Jill visit her daughter. And so anyway.
Very nice. Sounds like a good plan to me.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm so glad that you are bringing what you have learned to the people who are interested in the business, who are learning from the business, who may be getting, I don't know, from what I've heard from you, it's what you're given is pretty pragmatic stuff. And when you talk about hustling and relationships and dependability, those are things that can't be ignored.
Right.
And there's people out there who will say you can make money right away. Well, maybe, but it's not a short term. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, for crying out loud.
Yeah. And that's the whole reason why I really actually started coaching so much was because I was getting people very disappointed in the voiceover schools they were attending, and they were spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Right now, what we have is we have people out there bragging about stuff. It's very hard to prove if they even did it, with everything can be mocked up. And they're taking people for thousands of dollars with demos. And these people are just like, oh my gosh, it's so glamorous because I see this person spending this much and on a plane, and they're, traveling, and they have a house here and a house there. And I'm here to tell you that that's not reality. This is whatever this person and people, it's several people, are portraying. I don't feel that it's a good representation of what it takes to be successful in this business.
Yeah, it's difficult for the 1%ers to understand what the beginner, even though they went through it themselves. Of course, some of those 1%ers may have gone through it at a time when it wasn't so crowded, because it's crowded as can be now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know. I just don't want people to come in with the false sense of hope. I'd rather you be able to see it for what it is, and then make that decision if it's worth it to commit the amount of time that it does take to become a good voice talent and to build a business. It's just, that's what the majority of the people that come through here are very just, they think animation. They think, I want to be the voice in a cartoon, and all this stuff. And I'm like, you don't realize how difficult that is, B, how important LA is, and C, how the majority of money that you make in voiceover is actually in the other voiceover genres. So
it's that iceberg thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Then they go, ooh, animation. And meanwhile, underneath
is an ever expanding yet existentially threatened part of the business because of voice synthesis, or call it AI, whatever you want to call it. But all that stuff that's underneath the water, that is making people very, very significant livings.
Yes. Yes.
But it's anonymous. You got to live with the anonymity, right?
Well, the majority of the people that are actually making the really, really good money, you don't really hear from them. They're busy working and making their money, and they don't have to brag about it. They don't have to post on social media every job that they do. It's a quiet confidence that comes from being successful. But no, I try to keep everything based in reality. And I talk about rough times. I talk about when I'm not making money. I talk about the stress. I actually have a therapist coming on the podcast after yours to discuss how to handle for actors.
Oh my God.
Health issues. Yeah, because it is so prevalent with the amount of rejection that we face,
Oh.
And this is such a vulnerable business because you are putting your heart and soul out with your voice. And to get rejected is even that much more painful.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, Linda. Then, with the number of people who come to you for, I would say coaching whether it be vocal coaching or business coaching, what percentage of the people do you ever have to tell that I don't think you got it?
I would say there's about people come in for an assessment. I offer a free assessment here at the studio.
Wow.
And I have them read something for me, and I will give them I'll tell them, you have diction issues. You should focus on that first. Your accent, especially on Long Island, is very regional, and that's going to limit you tremendously. You need to be prepared to work on that. And also the biggest one is you need to go take some acting classes, because if someone doesn't have any kind of background in that, or they're just not generally loose with, lower their inhibitions in front of other people, then you really, now, especially with AI, we have to be great actors. We have to differentiate ourselves and connect with the listener now more than ever.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's for sure. The A, we got to remember, is artificial. And if we can present something that communicates our soul, or the soul of the intent of the author, of whatever words they are, that'll make a big, big difference.
Yeah, and that should be the focus. So I'm very honest with people. And then I'll just say, I think you should go do these things first and then come back. Or if I get a vibe from someone that they're really not. One guy came in and he told me that he doesn't like reading. And then I'm like, well, we're voice actors, and the majority of what we do is reading.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I just said, yeah, this is not going to be for you. But definitely, the last thing I want to do is work with someone who doesn't want to be here, doesn't have the right frame of mind. That's not enjoyable for me. It has to be someone else who's also passionate and wants to put in the work.
Oh yeah.
You
and putting in the work is well, why do 20%, 80% of the businesses fail in the first 2 to 5 years or something?
Mm-hmm. You got to put in the sweat equity, as they say, the sweat equity, right?
And the sweat equity in voiceover is really, compared to when I had my sound company, I was loading trucks. I had for real sweat equity.
Yeah.
I was loading cabinets into trucks. A younger man, obviously, but it's not. But what it does to your internal, the internal mindset, you just have to develop a different kind of mindset to be successful in any business, but particularly one where, as you say, your soul is being exposed.
Yeah, you have to have that tough skin, and but you got to put your feet to the fire to develop that tough skin, right?
Absolutely, but it's worth it. I remember it's worth it.
My first on-air shift up here on Long Island, I moved up from New York, and my first shift, my boss says to me, okay, I think it was 4th of July. And he goes, we're doing a live remote from maybe Jones Beach or something. We're going to be calling in 3 times an hour. You're also going to be playing, here's your playlist, and you're going to be taking calls and taking requests for songs too. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, what? He said, it's my first shift. And he looks at me and he says, Linda, I believe you will either sink or swim. He says, and I believe in you, and you will swim. And lo and behold, man, I went, but I took it in 5-minute increments. I was like, okay, what do I need to do for the next 5 minutes? What needs to be in place? Because that's how I handled it. But there you go. You got to be thrown in sometimes. And that's what happens with voiceover. You got to be thrown into those difficult sessions.
Very cool.
Make you a better performer, overall.
Yeah, it does. Handling the things when they go wrong is more important than handling them when they go right.
Well, quickly before we wrap up, so has anything ever gone wrong at an air show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been the announcer at 7 shows where there have been fatalities.
Oh my God.
One of whom, actually, my first wife passed away in 2007. I didn't remarry till 2012, but in the meantime, I dated a lady who I watched get killed in an air show.
Oh my God, Rob!
With her fiance standing next to me.
So she was a pilot, or
she was a wing walker.
Wing walker.
She was on the side of a wing, and the pilot got too slow, and he crashed, and she crashed and was killed, and he was killed as well.
Oh, my goodness.
So at that point, that's when the compartmentalization kicks in.
Yeah.
I've got 6 things to say right away. I go from being announcer and entertainer to being dad. I get very, I say, ladies and gentlemen, obviously something has occurred that we hadn't planned on. Here's what I need you to do. And then I go through those things. But including parents, turn your kids away from the scene.
Oh my goodness gracious. I don't even think about that stuff. That is a tough thing for you to deal with.
Which again points up to me that what we do in the booth is so correctable.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
exactly.
We don't do life and death.
Right.
There are a few stuntmen in the movie business who do life and death.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Cruise has done some pretty amazing stunts himself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some of which are probably life and death. And there are others who have done their own stunts, but typically there's always back to 1 or take 2 or click or punch and roll.
But not in that situation.
No.
Wow.
Well,
okay. I didn't want to end on a bad note.
Okay. Well, let's not do that because for those who have lost their lives, so many more millions have been entertained in a way that that aviation sparks in some of those people the highest, loftiest, and most exceptional and exciting goals ever. And I know of pilots who are flying with the Air Force Thunderbirds and Blue Angels who went to an air show and got inspired.
That's a great way to turn it. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Linda. This has been wow.
So much fun. I know.
Where did the time go?
Do you have a website? People can hear you. I mean, what you do?
RobReiderVoice.com.
So it's REIDER.
Yeah, Rob Reider
Rob
Voice.
Reider. And I'm also going to post in the show notes too, so you can check out his website and all that good stuff. But thank you so much for joining me today. This is fantastic. I love learning about all this.
And thank you. I am so honored to be part of your podcast. When I walked into the room and I saw Voiceover Gurus, I said, "You got to be kidding me, Dave."
That's awesome that you were listening to it.
Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, that's great.
Thanks so very, very much.
Thank you. So that wraps up another episode of the Voiceover Gurus podcast, and we will see you all real soon. Have a great day. Very nice. Very nice. You're the best.
Thanks for listening to the Voiceover Gurus Podcast. Real talk about the voiceover industry. Learn more about us and get coaching at voiceover.guru.